Hi, it's Keith from the Evangelical Free Church, Stony Stratford, and we're continuing our series of short talks in the Gospel of Mark. And today we're in Mark chapter 13, verses 14 to 23. Now, the disciples have been questioning Jesus about the destruction of the temple, which Jesus has predicted. Now, to them, it was akin to the end of the world or the end of the age. So Jesus is talking both about the temple's destruction, but also the things to come. Living in Milton Keynes, we'd have to be deaf, dumb and blind not to know about Bletchley Park and the important role that had in breaking the Enigma code during the Second World War, when they actually recovered an Enigma machine, one of these code things which the German U-boats had. They had a point of reference by which they could start to understand and break down the code. And Jesus, when he's speaking to his disciples, uses that kind of technique here. He says something strange to us, but the disciples would have had a reference to understand it. Verse 14, when you see the abomination that causes desolation standing where it does not belong, let the reader understand, and let those who are in Judah flee to the mountains. What's he talking about? Well, some hundreds of years or so earlier, a Greek general, Antronosus Epiphanes, who was a tyrant, had war against the Jewish people. And he had gone into the temple and he had sacrificed a pig to the god Zeus. Now, it wouldn't take much, we don't need to know a bit about Jewish religion to know that did not go down well. It was an appalling business, and after the war of the Maccabees, the temple had to be cleansed. So Jesus is saying, imagine the worst sort of thing you could imagine happening in the holiest of places. Something similar will happen. And he points out that, when this happens, it would be good to get out of town. And times are going to be tough. He says this, verse 17, how dreadful it be in those days for pregnant women and nursing mothers. Pray that this does not take place in winter. A terrible time is coming, and he alerts his disciples to it. And they would have put two and two together. This is going to be bad. The temple is going to be desecrated. And the thing to do would be to get out of town and be prepared, because there could be immense suffering. And in those kind of times, Jesus gives a warning. He says this, these days of distress are going to be unequal since the beginning of the world, and will never be equaled again. They're going to be bad. But he also points out it's a time where false teachers will thrive. Verse 21, at that time, if anyone says to you, look, here is the Christ, or look, there he is, do not believe it, for false Christs and false prophets will appear and perform signs and miracles to deceive the elect, if that were possible. So be on your guard, because I have told you everything ahead of time. What's he saying? In times of crisis, false teachers abound. There will be convincing imitators claiming to be from God. And they might be very convincing as well. People would really be taken in by them. But here's the good thing. Jesus is warning us in advance. There's a sense of reassurance in this, because he's saying, don't be surprised when this happens. Such things do happen in times of crisis. Such things always happen when people are desperate. This is where weird religious cults grow up, or weird religious sort of Christian, if you want to call them that, sects grow up, and there's all issues with that. And what Jesus actually talked about came to pass. In AD 66 to 70, there was a Jewish rebellion against Rome. And later, those who were rebelling against Rome started infighting amongst themselves. Zealots took over the temple and installed a clown as high priest. This is probably what Jesus means by the abomination that causes desolation. The Jewish historian recounts all of this and shows what a total disaster it was. And in the end, he records the massacre of the Jewish defenders of the temple and the destruction of the temple. The interesting thing was that many Christians heeded this and left Jerusalem at that time and were spared. What are we to do in such times? Because there's a second layer to this. It does refer to those times, but it also refers to the time since Christ has left this world and the time when he will return again. Well, we are to put our confidence in him. There are many teachers who will lead people down all kinds of paths, and we're not to be surprised at all. And Jesus' words are the most comforting we can have on this. In the Gospel of John, when he is in the upper room with his disciples, he tells them of the difficulties that are coming. But he also says this in John chapter 16, verse 33, I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. Now we're going to see that. The world, the evil, Satan's grip on us will be defeated by Christ's sacrifice on the cross. It was proved in his resurrection, and it will be doubly proved when he comes again for those who know and love him. If you're feeling beleaguered, if you're feeling times are tough, if you're struggling and wondering where to put your faith, put them in Christ. He has overcome. Times could be tough, but we have an assurance for the future. As usual, if you're interested, on the railings at the front, there's this Gospel of Mark if you'd like to follow this. Thank you very much for listening.